Good morning, Northshore. It's Thursday, September 23rd. I'm actually really excited I got the date right the first time this week. But anyhow, it's fabulous to be able to join you. This is the second day of fall, and I don't know about all of you, but it actually smelled like fall yesterday. So I'm excited about all things pumpkin and all of the really bountiful blessings the fall season brings. So this morning I'm joining you from Wellington Elementary School out east, home of the Wolverines, and I'm actually in Principal Brian Mathias's office. So appreciate Brian giving up his space for a few minutes. As you know, each year I visit every school and every classroom in each school. So today I have an opportunity to be with our Wolverines and our Wolverine staff here at Wellington. And I'll start the day here at 8:30 with a meet and greet with families in the gym. So if you're just watching and you're a Wellington Wolverine family, there's still time to join us at the gym at 8:30. So anyhow, as many of you know, we've started our batch testing this week, and it's rather an ambitious project. And school and district wide. And it's another layered protection strategy that we have in place to protect the health and safety of our students, staff, and community, as well as ensuring that we'll be able to sustain our schools staying open physically in person. And so to that end, I know there have been some questions about our batch testing and quarantining protocols. So I've asked our Deputy Superintendent and COVID Supervisor, Duggan Harman, to join me again this morning. So good morning, Duggan.
Morning, Dr. Reid.
How are you this morning?
Couldn't be better.
Well, there you go. It's fall, and fall is always the time we turn our attention to school. And this year also to COVID testing, right? So we can sustain our school reopening. So, Duggan, since we started testing on Monday, about how many students and staff have we tested?
Well, as of 7:45 this morning, and this will encompass the schools that were tested on Monday and Tuesday, but not the schools from yesterday. They're still being processed. We have processed 1,291 batches, which equates to right around 12,000 students and staff.
Well, that's fabulous. And that's only in the first 2 days. So we still have to add our third day. And it's what an undertaking. So how many positive batches have we had so far? And briefly, what happens after there is a positive batch? Because we certainly celebrate every negative batch.
Yeah, so far we have had 9 positive batches returned. That works out to 0.69% of those that we've surveyed or processed. Once that happens, then the school notifies the students and staff that are in a positive batch, and there can be up to 10 students or staff in each batch. They notify them, and then we have to determine if the student or staff member is vaccinated. They do not have to quarantine, but they have to receive a confirmatory test within 3 days. If they are unvaccinated, they must quarantine until they get a negative confirmatory test. With a negative confirmatory test, they're back in the classroom. And those confirmatory tests, we're offering them 3 days a week at Popkini. Currently between 12 and 2, we're looking if we need to expand that or not. Yesterday was our first day. I am sorry to say it did not go as smoothly as we expect, and we're working hard. I was on a 7:30 meeting this morning to fix that. We're working with the testing company to get more resources put into it because the wait time was unacceptable for parents yesterday. So we want to get that wait time down. We want to get people drive in, get tested, and get out. And then 24 to 36 hours from that, they will know the results. And if it's a negative, they're back in the classroom. Once we've identified a positive, then we will contact trace that positive and start down the whole quarantine, return to school process.
Well, thanks, Duggan. I know yesterday when you came in and said, do you have a minute? You might want to sit down. I thought, okay. But the fact that we are able to provide those tests so quickly, and we're also looking at hopefully being able to flex some of that time for our working families To me, we're building this seamless process kind of as we're implementing it. So we're bound to have some little hiccups here and there. So one of the things I want to emphasize, though, is that if those positive cases in the 0.69% had gone undetected, they have the potential, of course, to ripple and infect others and create potential outbreaks, which would have otherwise forced us to close down classrooms or a school. So I just want to reiterate how important this batch testing is, because many of the cases are asymptomatic. And so just really appreciate all of the efforts and know that with anything new, particularly of this magnitude, because we have so many people involved, there are going to be bumps in the road. So just appreciate everyone's patience and grace as we work through it. I know, Duggan, both you and I have received emails with suggestions and support about how we can tweak things here and there. And we're, of course, responsive to that. Anything that will best support the health and safety of our students and keeping our schools open, we're all in on. So, Duggan, let's discuss quarantine for a minute. All these words that I think you and I never thought we'd be having a conversation about in our careers, but here we are. We should remind everyone that our district spans 2 counties. And multiple cities. And that makes our district a little unique. And it's also created, I think, how do I want to say, a little bit of a lag in our ability to communicate clearly, because we really want one message to our Northshore families, even though we span these 2 counties. So could you kind of talk a little about how that's impacted our getting communication out on our quarantine guidelines?
Yes, certainly. So we always try to follow DOH guidelines. Sometimes those DOH guidelines are interpreted differently from counties. And in particular, in the case of King and Snohomish, for the last week, we've really been working with 2 interpretations. King County does allow a return from quarantine after 7 full days, as long as there is a negative PCR test after the 5th day. So that allowed some of our families. Student had been identified as a close contact. They were quarantined. They went out after 5 days. They got a test. It was a negative. After 7 days, they could come back. Snohomish County's interpretation of that was a little more rigid, and they were not allowing that. And so over the last week, you, Dr. Reid, have been spearheading the charge to get those 2 counties to the table to talk, and so that we can have a single message going out to parents.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, right? Because we were trying to figure out, it seemed just a little chaotic to think about, we have a Snohomish County quarantine rule and a King County quarantine rule, because we actually bus kids who live in one county to schools in the other. We have students and staff who live in both counties. It just didn't seem like it was a fabulous idea to have 2 standards. So, yeah, go ahead, Duggan.
I was going to say, we have families that have 1 child in a Snohomish school and 1 child in a King County school too.
Right.
Yeah.
It really became, I mean, if we've had to message some interesting things in the last 18 months, but that one, even I was like, from a health and safety standpoint, I couldn't find the right way to frame that. So anyhow, I'm glad we were able to kind of come together. And I will say, in part, the level of flexibility is being somewhat driven by the vaccination rate. And what we know is that our vaccination rate here in Northshore and in general in King County is higher. So that does enable a safe return on that 7th day with the 5th day confirmatory test. So what about students who are quarantined? I know we've sent out the quarantine learning plans. And we expect learning to continue as we minimize the number of students and the number of days that will need to be quarantined, because we're going to be continuing this testing, which should nip any potential outbreak in the bud much more quickly. So our goal is to have very few quarantines. And of course, at this time, it's my understanding, if you're vaccinated, Duggan, how does that impact the quarantine?
So vaccinated students and staff do not have to quarantine unless they're experiencing any symptoms.
Right.
There's still an expectation that they are tested, but they do not have to quarantine in the meantime.
Right, unless they're symptomatic.
Right.
Okay. So we will be sending, I know, information out later today on the learning plans for quarantine students. And again, our goal, and at this time, I believe we have fewer than 1% of our students actually quarantined. But I don't want to probably put a number on that, but we're really working hard to keep the classroom safe so that our quarantine numbers will stay low. But those learning plans should be headed out to families later today. We do have supports in place for students who need to be at home until they can return to the classroom. So another opportunity for our students to stay safe in the buildings is the Department of Health Test to Stay program. I want to make sure I said that right. The Test to Stay program. And Duggan, why don't you share a little about our plans for that? And, we're really looking forward to that partnership.
Yes, so the counties have just recently allowed districts to apply for Test to Stay approval, and we've started that process. We've submitted our application. I fully expect it will be approved. And Test to Stay allows a student who is a close contact who normally would be quarantined to continue in school with regular testing. And this is, I think the recommendation is at least twice a week. And so as long as that student is test negative, they can stay in school. Now, I want to point out this only applies to the school day. They still are not allowed to participate in extracurriculars or go out in the community. The fine tooth of the Test to Stay program says it's designed just to keep kids from losing learning. The rest of the quarantine would still apply. Right.
So as we move into this, and my understanding is we have to have an MOA, a memorandum of agreement, with each county. And those have just been released. And I know you're our contact for those. I think there are some folks who think those are already available, but we are right there at the cutting edge, and they're just now being developed. So, we'll be able to share more news soon. And we also want to share that it's really going to be based on good faith efforts, also in partnership with our families and their agreement. It seems like it's kind of a modified quarantine, right? Instead of quarantine from school, it's quarantine from the out of school, which is kind of like a flip quarantine.
Exactly. No, I think that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, I was really wrestling with, it actually makes sense, right? Because otherwise we have students quarantined from school who are still doing other things outside of school. So anyhow, well, so what about athletics and activities? Any changes, any new guidance, or are we still on a steady path there?
I would say we're on a steady path, nothing significantly new. I'm happy to say that our fall sports are happening. We've had very little COVID issues at all in any of our fall sports so far. And that's no news is always good news.
Well, I appreciate hearing that for sure. And I know our families and student athletes do. Middle school athletics, I know, was something we weren't really able to make the lift on last spring, but I understand we are making that lift. Any comments on how middle school athletics are moving forward?
They are moving forward. We've had a number of cross-country meets already. I've heard from a number of principals about those, and it's great to see our middle school students back out competing.
Yeah, I agree. I met with our student board for the first time last week, and we discussed mental health as one of our key topics. And I thought it was so wise. Both Emma from Woodinville and Boosie from North Creek talked about how important being involved in something was to their mental health. So just our ability to keep them active and connected. I think connections is our big word this year. Connected to each other, to activities, to school. And they're just so excited for the opportunity to participate in a safe and healthy way. I'll also say, though, they express this sincere wonder about just how hard it is to be back sometimes, right? Like, because they still, even back with others, they're still struggling with, they're different people than they were when they left. So anyhow, lots to unpack as we roll through this fall. I want to thank you, Duggan, for joining us this morning, and let's keep up the good work, and hopefully day 3 of testing has similar batch results. I know schools celebrate when they have no positive batch.
We all celebrate.
Yeah, I think we all do. Principals for sure as well. So I will say I've had a chance to get out and watch football games and soccer and some volleyball, and just it's excited to see our Northshore family following our health and safety guidelines and competing really hard the way we always have. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for joining us. And in the meantime, stay safe, healthy, and above all, let's remember to be kind to one another. Thank you.